Thank you for tuning into my channel. This is Pink Street Paranormal, and I am Marie Lopez. I am going to be talking about different paranormal events and happenings going on right here in Missouri, state of Missouri. I live in Kansas City. There's a lot of things that are going on that most people are afraid to talk about. So I'm going to personally give you a rundown of what happened to me growing up, living in Kansas City, Missouri. I lived on a street called Longview Road right off of Food Lane, and talk to you about what I dealt with as a young African-American woman and a very large African-American family in the South Kansas City area and what we went through. Most people have this misconception that paranormal experiences are always tied to one demographic of people, but I'm here to tell you, I know several families, Black families, Latino families, Korean families that have dealt with paranormal experiences that just don't talk about it. We don't disclose it because we have a subcultural understanding that we shun those things away and we don't talk about them, and we use other forces and alternative spiritual beliefs to build a barrier of protection around us. So anything outside of that barrier, as far as paranormal is considered, it shouldn't affect us and we shouldn't be exposed to it. Well, I'm here to tell you, I am a Black African-American woman and I have dealt with some things that you would not even believe. Let's start with the house we lived in. I am the middle child. I have four older sisters, four older siblings, and four younger siblings. And smack dead in the middle, back then when we lived in this house, I was 4, going on 5. It's back in the late 80s. And growing up during that era, there was an unspoken understanding where we did not discuss anything paranormal. My parents both live in the same household. We all have the same parents. And it was a new venture. It was a new level of transition for us, moving to South Kansas City. If you moved to that area, you were kind of doing good back in the late 80s. So if you were out there anywhere further south of 55th Street, you were doing pretty good. That was at least how other people saw it. So moving forward, speeding forward, we moved into this house, 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, not very big, barely 1,000 square feet, had its own backyard, had a nice garage. So it was a step up for our family. We were doing a lot better than where we were. So this was progression for us. So being 4 years old, most people don't think that 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds or kids in that age group can remember or retain information when it comes to being exposed to things at that young age, at that early age. Well, I am one of those kids who actually retained a lot, was exposed to a lot, and remembers every detail of what I went through as a kid. I can remember everything. I can remember the clothes I wore. I can remember the clothes other people wore. I can remember the people that I was associated with. I can remember things that other people did or said or heard. I can remember, and I retained all of that when I was so young. So just to point that out and get that understanding, I was a very observant kid, and I was very, very, very tuned in, as you could say. I got my laptop on and my phone's on my laptop, so I had to turn that light back on. So I was very tuned in, and I was always open to new things and open to understanding different levels of things that went on in different types of events. So I was one of those very rambunctious, very active, very inquisitive kids. Again, I was the middle child, but back then when we lived in this house out in South Kansas City on Longview Road, I was second to the third youngest kid back then. It was only 6 of us back then. So, and my mom was pregnant. Most of us are still stair-steppers, which means that we came one right after the other. Most of us are only a year apart. So, growing up in such a large family, you know, we were very close. We were very close. It was very intimate, and we did a lot of things together. My parents were very, very structured, very organized, and anything that we did, most of the time, wasn't gone unnoticed by any of the other family members. We all knew what was going on. We all knew what was, what was to be expected on a regular basis as far as a routine. My parents were very strict. They were very strict on our grades. They were very strict on our physical attire. They were very, very, very strict. As far as the household, we had to keep a very neat, tidy household. Everything with a large family, you wouldn't think that it would be so clean all the time, but my family was so clean. everything. If we even had a speck on the table, my dad would wake us all up and we'd have to clean the whole kitchen again. So moving forward, the first day that we moved into the house, I had a very heavy feeling when I was in the driveway. I was always helpful and very supportive of my parents whenever they wanted to bring groceries in or had stuff to carry in the house. I was always that helpy, gotta help with everything kid. So I went to the truck to help my father unload. At this time, we had just pulled into a gravel driveway. My dad was playing his Bob Marley music, and you know, we were just kind of setting the tone for our new home. The garage door was open, and I ran to my father and I grabbed this little yellow pickup truck, because back then I was a tomboy, so I loved playing with boys' toys and footballs and basketballs and anything that wasn't girly. I was more than likely playing with it. So I grabbed my little yellow Tonka truck, and a Tonka truck back in the 80s was a big deal, if anybody remembers Tonka truck. So I grabbed my yellow Tonka truck and I tried to roll it into the garage because I was going on a mission. I needed to find out what room was mine, and I was ready to check out and explore this house. Tried to roll that truck in, and it would not move. Picked it up, looked at the wheels, examined it all over, and the truck looked to be in good condition. It didn't look like there was anything that would stop it, so I tried to roll it in the driveway. And remember, this is day one when we moved into this house. 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, flat house, no basement, no stairs, no attic, none of that. Just one flat ranch style home and a driveway and a backyard. So I'm trying to roll my car into this garage, and my truck's not going. So I take it to my father, and he looks it over, hands it back to me, and then I go and try to roll it in the garage again. And at that point, I'm just like, this is not working. I can't get it in the garage. Let me just walk around and just do my investigating of the house, just to see where my next hiding places are going to be, because I used to love playing hide and seek with my siblings. So I started carrying the Tonka truck in the garage, and then I get to the back of the garage, and in the back of the garage, there's a big concrete wall, kind of like a cement wall. In that wall, there is a circle. It was a hole big enough for me to put my fist through. So, being the inquisitive kid I was, I mosey on over to that hole and I stick my fist in, and then all of a sudden I feel this shock go through my body. So I ran out the garage, ran over to my father, tripped on a couple of pieces of gravel, and then I turned around and looked, and there's this dark shadow in the garage. So my father put me down. He goes on about his way. He continues to unload the truck and start carrying things in the house. So I decide, you know what? I'm going to run into this house, because at that point the shadow had kind of like disappeared. So I run into the house and I run over to my mom, and she's in the kitchen and she's unloading things, because she was very, very neat and very pristine and very organized. So when my mom did things, she did things in a certain order. So she put certain plates, certain places, everything was nice and organized. So she's in the kitchen and she's unloading things, and I go in and I help her. So I go in and I start helping my mom put things away. We put groceries in the refrigerator, had to have everything lined up. My mom is very organized. She had to have everything color coordinated. So it was all color coordinated. And so after about 30-45 minutes, we get all the dishes in there and everything's nice and organized. So me and my mom, we sit back on the couch, which is directly across from the kitchen. So me and my mom, we walk into the back bedroom to unload a couple boxes, probably about maybe 10-15 minutes. We hadn't been really gone that long. So then we come back into the living room, look into the kitchen. Everything is disarray. All the food is out of the refrigerator, is on the floor. All the plates and dishes, everything that my mom had put away nice and neatly was all over the floor, everywhere. So my mom's looking at me, and I'm looking up at her. And then she calls my brothers in, and my brothers come into the house. My brothers, my brothers are only a couple years older than me. So my brother Robbie was 5 at the time, and my brother Wolf is what we called him, because he resembled a wolf and he was very active and always was on the go. So his nickname was Wolf. So she looks at Wolf. Wolf is a couple years older than me. He's about 8 at the time. So she's asking them, did you guys come in here and move anything in the kitchen? So Wolf and Bobby are looking like, no, we didn't touch anything. So they run back outside in the backyard, because in the kitchen there was a door that lead right back to the backyard. And then to the left of the house, the left of the kitchen was the garage. So, you know, they go back outside, me and my mom, we put everything away. And I'm thinking about it, you know, just put everything back away. And then we go turn around and go get some more boxes from the living room and to take into the bedroom. We come back out, hadn't have been maybe 5 minutes. Everything is in disarray again. Everything is right back out. We didn't hear anything. So all of a sudden I look at my mom's face and she's looking in the corner and I see a dark shadow pass by the back door and then vanish into the wall. So my mom is standing there with this look of fear all over her. She was so afraid. She stood in that spot for a good 10 minutes. And she was pregnant at the time. So my mom is, you know, like 7 months pregnant at that time. So I'm rubbing her belly and I'm trying to get her attention, but she would not move. Suddenly my father walks in. So he's looking around. He's like, what happened to the kitchen, you know? So my mom eventually comes back to herself, collects herself, and she's trying to explain it to him. And then, you know, just kind of moving forward as the weeks go on, we started experiencing even more paranormal activity. And it just starts to get intense. And not only does it become like dark shadows that my entire family was seeing, we started to, obviously, objects were moved around constantly. Lights were going on and off. The water would go on and off constantly or make a loud noise. We started hearing growling noises. We also started feeling touched. We would feel very cold and different cold spots throughout the house, and we would have the feeling of being touched constantly. From what I was told, I was always affected most by the entities, and my mom would see me floating across the floor. In the middle of the afternoon, she would see me floating from my bedroom into the living room, so she would grab me, and then she would comfort me and console me and put me back to bed or go into the room with me or let me lay in the room with her. So my father was the one who was a skeptic. You know, my dad was a skeptic. He didn't want to believe that anything was going on. He wanted to put it off on us because he felt like as a man, you know, he had to protect his home. And he had to assume some type of responsibility over what was going on. So most of the time he would push it off and deflect it on us until one day he had to bust out the window in his car to rescue me because there was a dark entity in the car with me. And the car was on, the keys weren't in ignition, and everything was locked. Nobody could get me out of the car, so my dad had to bust out the window just to get me out of the car. So at that point, he started to become a believer, but he wasn't entirely convinced. You know, he wasn't entirely convinced till one day I had a dream, and I do remember the dream of me floating. And I was floating, and I floated into my mom's bedroom, and I remember having a knife, and I was standing over my parent. So from what my father told me, mind you, this is just me dreaming, and my dream is an actual event that was taking place. So my father wakes up, and he sees me, and he says I'm standing over my mom with a butcher knife, and he grabs me, and as he grabs me, I'm floating in the air, like I'm literally freaking floating in the air. So he grabs me, pulls me back down to the ground, takes the knife out of my hand, wakes my mom up. He tells her what was going on, and then, you know, at that moment, I guess he started to be more convinced because he started to look after me, and this my little earbud. He started to watch over me a little bit more and watch me closely because I was getting the bulk of the paranormal exposure and the paranormal attacks. So my parents would watch me so much more closely. So at that point, you know, they started to become so intense in this house, and it was just such a feeling of anger, and it was so emotional. It was the most outrageous moment of my life. We stayed in the house for about a year because I had turned 5 by the time we eventually left. So we stayed in there about a year. You know, my mom had been trying to get my father to leave sooner, but, you know, he just wasn't pushing. He wasn't moving in that direction. So eventually, my mom woke us up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, didn't pack any of our stuff, left everything behind, walked us out of the house with exactly what we had on, which is night clothes, no shoes, no anything. She left. She said she tapped my father on the head and said if he wanted to go, he could go. If he wanted to stay, he would stay. But she had to leave. So we left the house at 5 o'clock in the morning and never returned, and never took a piece of clothing or anything with us except what we had on. So to say that to a person and to let other people know what you've gone through, what you've experienced, that you were floating, that you hear growling, that you had paranormal activity going on in your home when you were younger, to actually say that to somebody they're going to look at you like you're crazy, right? That's the first thing they're going to see. They're going to be like, no, you know, you've got some screws loose. You need to go see a doctor. They're not going to want to believe anything beyond their own scientific doubt. So I'm here to tell you that there are people that have had these exposures in this world, that have been exposed to these paranormal events and these paranormal happenings, that are people of color, that are people of urban cultures and various backgrounds and various religious beliefs, besides the typical norm that we see on TV, like The Conjuring and things like that. There are people that have gone through these paranormal events and in situations and had these spiritual encounters, and they're just not willing to talk about it because they're afraid of what other people would say and how they're going to respond and how they're going to look at them. And I'm here to break that barrier. I'm going to break that system of fear so people can be more dedicated to talking about it, and they're not as reluctant to speak on it just because of the whole social dynamic perception. So I'm opening that doorway for people to come out and tell their stories, because there's a lot of people holding back. And I want people to know that there are things that exist outside of our everyday life. There are spiritual activities that take place. There's a lot of things that science can't always explain that happen in our lives, in our spiritual lives, in our human form. There are things that happen to us, and we have to be understanding and not afraid to get acquainted with that realm of existence, as you can call it. There's other things that exist, just like there's dinosaurs. We haven't seen them. We've seen skeletons of them, but we believe that they exist because of the evidence. There's evidence. There's documentation of these paranormal events that have taken place, and we have to come to terms with, yes, there is other things going on outside this world than us humans or the animals that we found and we labeled and we classified and we gave names to. There's other things that have taken place in our world that we have to learn to embrace in a different format and not fear or dismiss. Because that's what most of us have done, is dismiss the idea of that being a existence. So again, this is Pink Street Paranormal. I am going to be documenting a lot of paranormal activity that is going to be taking place, that does take place in Kansas City, outside Kansas City, in the state of Missouri. Just to give you a little bit of history on Missouri, again, Missouri is the third most fought over state during the Civil War. There were 43% of the battles of the Civil War took place in Missouri alone. Missouri has a lot of bloodshed. It has a lot of history. There's the Battle of Lexington, and that's in Lexington, Missouri. The battle that happened as a result of the Order Number 11 that happened right here in Hickman Mills, because of the pro-slavery, anti-slavery laws and the submission under the Order Number 11 as a result of the government enforcement. There's a lot of history here. My house that we lived in was on a lot where a slave owner, as well as a slave master, built a mansion. He built a mansion on this lot and had slaves and immigrants tending to the farm. And the government decided, hey, Missouri needs to adopt the same laws as other states and become anti-slavery instead of pro-slavery. So a lot of people in Missouri didn't want to abide by that law. So they were rebellious against the law, and they wanted to fight. So you have the guerrillas, and then you have the Jayhawkers, which were anti-slavery, and then you have the Bushwhackers, which were pro-slavery, which were the ones from Missouri. So you have all of these different groups fighting, and a lot of bloodshed and a lot of death and a lot of destruction. Houses were killed. There were murder-suicide situations. The lot where my house was built on, underneath that entire section was an unmarked grave. It was a moat of nothing but dead bodies, okay? There was a lot of dead bodies that were buried in that moat. And that had a lot of unmarked graves, a lot of slaves, a lot of immigrants. So this state has a lot of history, and I'm going to unveil a lot of that history. I'm going to be conducting interviews. I'm going to be doing some field investigations. I have a team of paranormal experts that will accompany me, and we will go out in the field and do our research and gather more information and documentation to give exposure to what's really going on in Missouri. Missouri has a history, and I'm getting ready to unveil it. Stay tuned. I got another video coming up, and it's going to be the video where I interview a lady from Lexington, Missouri, and their house is one of the houses, the original houses back in the early 1900s that were built by one of the slave masters during the Battle of Lexington. So it's going to be awesome. So stay tuned for that, and I'm going to keep you guys posted as I go on my journey to expose a lot of things that are taking place in Missouri, paranormal activity. We are going to collect this history, collect this information, and talk to some real life homeowners, some real life residents of Missouri who are staying in haunted houses, who want to tell their story. So stay tuned. Peachtree Paranormal. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to my YouTube page. Peachtree Paranormal is on Facebook, Peachtree Paranormal on IG. Like, follow, subscribe. I'll look forward to giving you guys more content, and I will talk to you soon.